Feeling like you've spent all your mana?
All out of moves.
Have you fired off that sweet combo?
If so, it's time to cool down with
Anthony Fudd.
Welcome to the Cool Down. I'm Jamie Rollins. I am the People Operations Manager here at Funomena.
And I'm Andrea Luke. I'm a producer here at Funomena.
I'm Jake Whitener. I'm a producer and designer.
My name is Leah. I'm an intern. I work on social and all things pitch related.
And I'm Anthony Fudd. I'm a senior producer at Funomena.
Sweet. Thanks everyone for being here. Cooldown's a new interview series brought to you by our marketing communications team here at Funomena. It's part of an ongoing goal to share more about the wonderful people that make up our studio. And we're going to start regularly interviewing our developers to learn more about their careers. So the Cooldown includes questions from us, the interviewers on the Marcom team, as well as questions sourced from across the studio.
And Cooldown is so excited to have Anthony Fudd join us. As you guys are aware, he is a senior producer here at Funomena. And during Anthony's career, he has led the development of product experiences for all ages, including the design of new ways to play with iconic construction toys, launching new hardware to expand the realm of educational games, developing new interaction mechanics for social gameplay, and managing the production of kid-friendly software to take the complexity out of programming robots. Thank you for cooling down with us, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
Anthony, we're so glad you're here. We're going to start off with like one of the most basic questions, try to get a little context about your career. So we want to ask you, what brought you into the game industry? Where did that initial interest originate, and how did you end up here?
So my entry into the game industry was kind of roundabout. It wasn't like a direct thing. It wasn't like I came up and said, hey, I want to make games. It was, but I did have an early drive, very early, a drive to make toys. And so my first job was as a designer at Lego Mindstorms. And so designing that product, my role was to basically kind of like a multifaceted role, but like some of it was to like develop cool things that would like get a lot of buzz and excitement about the product. But also I worked closely with the engineers to make sure that the software was providing the right functionality for the types of things that kids wanted to build. And in that process, I learned a lot about developing software and a lot about like making software that was like easy to use for kids. And I really enjoyed creating that experience, especially experiences that kids could actually use to create their own experiences. And so that part of like software development was really appealing to me. And then I had an opportunity after Lego to work for LeapFrog. And at the time, LeapFrog was working on a new product that was called Leapster. And it was a handheld gaming device for very young kids. Now, at that time, there was only like the Game Boy was like the only like mainstream handheld gaming device, but it was aimed at like older kids. We were making a device that was for like pre-K to like third grade. And so I thought it was exciting to work on products for that age range and make games specifically for that age range. And so my job as a producer at LeapFrog was basically to design and produce games for that handheld device. And that was my first foray into actually making like real commercial games. And I loved it. And as I said, I really got hooked on that experience of making something that kids could use and create their own kind of experience, and they could manipulate the experience. So that was my start, and I got hooked, and then I kind of never stopped.
That's awesome. Also, as a kid who really wanted like LeapFrog products, because I'm like younger than you guys at least, that's super cool.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun making those games. It was really a lot of fun. It was kind of Wild West because we were building the hardware at the same time that we were designing the games. And as I said, like no one had really designed games for that young of an age. And they were also educational games. So it had, there were a lot of elements involved. And yeah, it was just really exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know a lot of us at the studio have a lot of nostalgia for things that you've worked on, and definitely led to some of our own paths into learning some STEM stuff or being creative with those same skills and working on games. So speaking of nostalgia, got a question from the studio. Bradley wants to know, what was the first game that you ever played? Or even that you remember playing, first game that really stuck with you?
Yeah. First game I ever played was Pac-Man. I was one of the original Pac-Man fever kids. So that tells you how old I am. But yeah, Pac-Man was all the rage. And it was the first stand-up cabinet game that I ever played. And I played it, and Pac-Man was so popular at that point that they actually had a stand-up cabinet in my supermarket. And that's the first place that I played it. It wasn't in an arcade, it wasn't in a mall, it was in my supermarket. And yeah, I got hooked on Pac-Man. And that was like the first real game that I ever played.
Sweet.
That is amazing. I had no idea that they had Pac-Man at the supermarket. I think I go grocery shopping a lot more. But that was still the case. And Anthony, so curious about kind of, the games that you play outside of work, but also just, I know on a personal level that you're also a huge music fanatic. And so we've got a question from the studio, actually from Pace, who's wondering, what's the music that you've been listening to lately?
Yeah, it's funny. Again, like I think maybe because of the age when I grew up, I grew up in the early days of like hip hop and rap, and if you go back and you listen to some of those tracks now, you realize just how sparse they are. Like some of the tracks literally like there's that line like 2 turntables and a microphone, and like some of them that's literally all they had. And so you had a beat, and then you had someone rhyming over it. And I so I love that, from those days. It was kind of, it's kind of nostalgic for me. And so like lately I've been listening to a lot of lo-fi beats, because it kind of has that similar feel. And in the 90s, I kind of got into like kind of electronic music. And so some of the lo-fi kind of mixes some of those beats with like electronic sounds. And so I'm really into that. That's kind of like my thing that I listen to a lot now. But my taste in music has really spans the gamut, and I think like I've always kind of like looked for music that was kind of different, especially after I left home. Just trying to find like new experiences and new music. Like one of my cousins like used to bring music that he recorded, like back in those days, he would record music off the radio on a cassette. And he would, like, there were these late night programs, these radio shows that would play this awesome music coming out of New York. And so that was like some of the first times that I heard like Africa Bambaataa, and Planet Rock and things like that. And we were like, whoa, what is this? And so I always had that drive to kind of like find like just new weird sounds and new music, and that's always been a kind of thing that I really loved. So I listen to everything from blues to rock to electronic. Some genres I don't like to say that I really listen to them, but there are always like certain songs that are certain genres that resonate with me. Even like some punk rock songs, definitely some classical music. Even I don't listen to country a lot, but there are definitely some country songs that I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool country song. So pretty much anything, but like these days I like the lo-fi because it kind of reminds me a lot of like my youth.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because like lo-fi is also just a mix of so many different genres, even from like jazz to hip hop. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
And it makes me happy to hear you mention recording off the radio, because my childhood I lived for making mixtapes, and so I need to start making more mixtapes.
Yeah. Yeah, like that was a thing, like it's kind of funny. I don't know. I guess we have playlists now, which are kind of like that. But yeah, it's a little different because you would make that tape and it was a physical thing and you would give it to your friend, and like, yeah, it was very special.
Not only that, you had to have the timing so it wouldn't cut off at the end of the song. That took talent right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you had the dual decks, you could really kind of dial it in. You could like
Yeah. So we have another question from the studio. Martin would like to know, if you were to write a book, what type of book would it be and what would it be about?
Wow.
That's deep.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I make a lot of things, like all types of things. Like I make like crafts, and I make like, I build robots and still do that. But and I've had some ideas of like, maybe I should make a book and teach people how to make some of this stuff. That's one of the ideas that I've had. But then there's one idea that's kind of been kicking around. I wouldn't call it like an autobiographical book, but it's kind of like throughout like mostly started in my later 20s, where I would write down little sayings, things that I would come about, like something that would, some experience that I had, and I'd kind of boil that experience down into like a little life saying. I would call them life sayings, and I've been collecting those things for like over a decade now, and I think they would make an interesting book. I've been thinking about like a book like that. You can't just it's really hard to just sit down and write it, because they really are from like life experience. And so I figured like, at some point, now I have a decent number of them that I could start like putting them together and making a book. And I think that would be a really interesting book. It's almost like a collection of like kind of like good rules to live by.
Words of wisdom mixed into
That's awesome.
and meditations on craft.
Yeah, like just like all kinds of different things, but like boiled down to like almost like little catchphrases or like little slogans, like little tidbits. And
Aphorisms.
so, I think that would be the most interesting book that I could write.
I think you need to do that. It can be kind of like Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy on SNL, but
Right.
it's Deep Thoughts with Anthony Fudd.
Yeah.
I'd read it. I love autobio. It's like my favorite.
On the flip side of that, totally opposite end of the spectrum, we have another question from the studio, actually from Brad. And the question is, what fictional world from either a game, movie, or book would you like to visit?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Wow, there's so many. I would, from a game, I would love to visit Mario World. I just think it'd be such a weird world. It's kind of weird, but it's cute, but it's also got some danger in it. It's a little strange. But I think one world that immediately came to mind is from a book, and it's from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, and it's from one of the books in that series called The Magician's Nephew. Mm-hmm. And it was it's described as like a little clearing kind of in a forest, and in this clearing there are like all these different little puddles of water, and if you jump into a puddle, it teleports you to a different world. And then like you pop back out. I kind of forget how you pop back out. I think maybe you jump into a puddle again, or the magic kind of pulls you out. But the thing is, like, it's this cool setting of like, you don't know where you're gonna go, and each world is very different. I always thought, like, for some reason, I always kind of thought that would be a really cool place to, if you found this like magical place, meadow inside a forest, where you could like jump into these magical worlds. That would be very cool. I know that's kind of combining like multiple worlds into one world, but I think like I always just thought that space was when I was reading that book, like imagining that space was just very powerful, and so yeah, I think I would go there.
That is a great answer.
And really, I don't know. I feel like most people would say Star Wars is the first thing they're gonna say. That's really cool. Okay, we're gonna go into a little more career-oriented questions now. It'd be
Mhm.
great knowing a lot more about what goes on in your mind and your interests and the things you do on the day-to-day. This question is from Jason. And he wanted us to ask you, what is one of your favorite projects that you worked on and why? He didn't specify here or anywhere, so
I would say across your career.
in
Unfortunately,
your
again,
career,
most of
yeah.
the things at the moment are still NBA. We're excited to show them
right.
too.
Yeah. There are several, and there are several that have special place in my heart for different reasons. Obviously, like working at Lego Mindstorms was fantastic. It was amazing, and it really taught me a lot of things. But I think I talk about Lego Mindstorms a lot, so I think I'm gonna give another example. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed. It was funny because I just recently this weekend I met up with my colleague who was my producer at the time on this project, and this was a project that we worked on at LeapFrog, and it was a Spider-Man title. And one of the things that I really loved about it, because like we had to create the story, and so I got to basically craft. I did a couple of drafts, but I crafted a story for this Spider-Man title, and it was this was for the Leapster, and it was a story about spelling. And there was a criminal going around the city mixing up the letters on different signs, and so Spider-Man had to go and find out who was doing this, and it was really kind of a funny thing. And at the end of the story, he foils the criminal because the criminal tries to push his way outside the exit when it says pull, and he like slams into the door, and then like Spider-Man catches him. But the thing is, and there's a lot of other things that happen in the story, but the thing that's kind of cool about it was that I wrote the story, and in order to get it approved, like we had to send it to Marvel, and they gave us a green light on the story. So I consider that I officially got a story greenlit by Marvel for that title, and so that's one of the things. It was just really cool to work on that. And it was just a great and really fun project. And I think that for me, that was like one of the pinnacles of working at LeapFrog, because it was like you got to create these wonderful things for kids. And sometimes it was like great for you too, to be able to just like create this thing, and for especially for these entities that you kind of grew up with. So I think I would list that as one of my top favorite projects.
I probably would do the same. If I got the green light from Marvel, I'd be like, one time,
yeah,
I made this story.
That basically makes you a part of the Marvel universe, Anthony.
Exactly. Superhero question answered.
So we have heard you mention several times about your experience with robotics, and we know that it's something that you also have a passion for that you like to do outside of work. So I was wondering, like, what started that passion, and do you have a favorite robot or toy or anything that you have worked on?
Yeah. The robot thing, when I was a kid, I would make a lot of things. I would make like a lot of craft things. I would make tons of things out of cardboard. Like it was pretty impressive, some of the things that I would build out of cardboard. Like I would make all kinds of models. Like I made a model of like the space shuttle once out of cardboard, and like I painted it with like Testor's paint and everything. And I made like a Model T, a rolling Model T car out of cardboard, and I painted that up. And so I would always make things. And we didn't have, like we weren't like super, rich growing up, but and so like I usually like, if I had toys, like I would hold on to them, and even if they were broken, and I would fix them if I could, or if I couldn't, I would take parts of them and make other toys. So I think like that nature of making things out of other things, like I always carry that through everything. And I think the first taste of actual robotics that I got was when I first actually played with Lego. And the funny thing is, like, I never actually played with Lego when I was a little kid. It wasn't until like I was like a teenager, and that was like someone introduced me to the Lego Technique set, which like had like gears and like, you know, motors and things. And I was like, oh wow, you can make things that move. And I, you know, like I said, like I had taken toys and put them together and made new toys that would move and things like that. And so now, like having the raw components to actually make whatever you wanted, however you wanted to do it, that was really refreshing, because like I wasn't limited to just like certain parts that had come off of broken toys. I could actually make things, and I think that's really where it started. I had that in mind. At first, I wanted to go into a career of designing remote control toys, because I thought that remote control toys were really fascinating. They were fascinating to me. Like the idea that you control something from far away was always very cool. But also like the technology involved in some of the toys at that time. I remember like when I first saw an automatic transmission for little RC cars. So you would drive and it would automatically change gears for you. But the cool thing was, like, this particular module, for whatever reason, they made the cover of it transparent so that you could see inside and see what was going on. And that really, like, you know, it like opened up like a whole door for me. And I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to make toys like this where kids can see what's going on. And then when I got the opportunity to work for Lego Mindstorms, it just was like a dream come true. And so when I was working at Mindstorms, that's when I really started to really get into robotics. And yeah, and I just never stopped. And so I've developed a lot of robot toys, and I brought a couple here.
Yeah, we love show and tell.
I can. So I have two. So this one is it has a name. This name is Refrigerator Fred, and Refrigerator Fred. It was designed. It was one of the things that I was challenged with when I first started working. It was the first task that I was given when I joined Lego Mindstorms. They were like, well, you know, can you make something? They were like, they gave me a list of things. They were like, well, can you make like a better mousetrap? And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe. And they were like, can you make something that would tell kids if the light goes off in the refrigerator? And I was like, huh, yeah, you could do that. Because in the set, you had two motors, you had two touch sensors, and you had one light sensor. And so I figured, oh, well, if you have a light sensor, you could tell if the light goes on or off. But then I had to figure out, like, what's a cool way that you could show that? And so with this little robot, I was like, oh, well, you know, if he has a little face, and like he has like little sunglasses. And so the idea is that when it's bright, he drops his sunglasses down, and when it's dark, he lifts them up. And so you would put him into the refrigerator, and then when you put him in there and the light's on, he would drop his glasses down. And then when you would open the door, you would there was like a short delay of like a half second, and you would see, does he have them up or does he have them down? And so if he had them up, you know that the light had gone off and that it caused him to lift his glasses. So that was the very first thing that I designed for them, it's still like one of my favorite things because it's so simple, but it does like touch on one of those age-old questions, like, yeah, what does light go off when you shut the door? You know, when you're a kid, you think about that. So that's one of my favorites. But you know, I have another one here, and so this is one of the products that I worked on, and this is Dash. And so Dash is a little robot, and you see he's got some arms there, and he can control that with his head. Now, the funny thing about this is, like, so this comes off, and when we recently released Dash, he doesn't have any limbs, so he's just like a body, and the only actuator that he has is his head. And so that we released Dash, and Dash was on the market for a little while, and I saw, like, through a lot of play tests, like how kids were playing with Dash, and I saw what they wanted to do with it, and I really wanted to give Dash, you know, limbs so that they could manipulate things. Because I think, like, you know, when you think about robots, that's one of the things you think about is that, oh, they can actually do stuff for you, you know, like. And so one of the last projects that I worked on, we built these little connectors that would let you connect with and decorate Dash with Lego. And so I was like, you know, instead of just decorating Dash, we can actually make him have functional limbs. And it was a real challenge because, like I said, the only thing that moved on Dash was its head. And so using that motion, and I had to design some parts so that when he turns his head, he can not only grabs things, but it also has a little motion where it picks them up. And so we made a whole little set where he could have a cube and a ball that he could grab and pick up, and you could play games with it. And it was really exciting for me because it really breathed new life into a product that had been on the market for, at that time, about 2 to 3 years. And it was not, if you had bought Dash like 2 years ago, you could buy this set and then give him a whole new set of abilities. So I was really happy with that because it was really fun to see the kids be able to give Dash some new life. And I have one more to show if you want to see it.
Bring it on.
Keep them coming.
So those are some of the products that I worked on. And then for some of the stuff that I do in my personal life, so this is my latest personal robot. And this one, he's kind of a beast. He's huge. But again, this is kind of similar to the arms that I just showed you with Dash. I really wanted a robot that has like some form of utility. And so this robot, I built this robot all out of spare parts. So you can see there's a lot of like educational like components and gears and things. It's just stuff that I had laying around. And so he has an arm on him. He can lift his claw up and down. He can open that. He can rotate his wrist 360. He can turn his whole arm, and it goes up and down.
When he becomes sentient, he has the ability to open your doors.
Yeah. And so he can do quite a few things, and so he can also move around. And so the idea is that I wanted a robot that could be somewhat functional in like a regular environment. And he's big enough and he's strong enough that he can actually lift and carry things. So you can imagine like very simple tasks in the home. You can have him like deliver things to the garbage. One of the things that I'm doing as my main test is I'm seeing if he can like bring me a little bottle of water. But like that's the kind of stuff that I work on when in my spare time now when I'm doing robots. And it's part of my dream of like making robots that, because I have a philosophy that you know, with all the things that we've done with toys in my career, I learned that you can do a lot with very little as far as technology. Right? So I'm convinced, although some people tell me I'm crazy, I'm convinced that you can do meaningful things with a very simple robot. And so that's what this robot is for, and it's for me to test out some of those ideas. You know, because we have a lot of great robots. There are a lot of robots. I think you know, Amazon just released a new robot. And I think that those robots are fascinating from a technology standpoint. But I think that from an imagination standpoint of like what we think about when we think about robots, they've always been a little bit lacking. You know, there's no real utility. You may have like a camera that can move around your house. That's fine. But can it like bring me a glass of water? Can it take something to the garbage? Those kinds of fun things that you think of when you think about robots. I'm waiting for the day that we can actually bring that to life. And so that's what this robot is all about.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for showing us those awesome robots, Anthony.
Yeah, super cool. I loved the way you tied it into kind of those ideas about childhood wonder with the see-through component box, and thinking about how many people have gone into modifying their like Game Boys and stuff because those crystal plastic displays. I always thought like, oh, it's just this nostalgic thing for me growing up, but I didn't realize like how much of that creates that curiosity. Yeah. So yeah, I think you have a next question. I think you've actually spoken a lot on robots and Lego Mindstorms. Eddie wanted to know like how you came to be involved. So I guess, maybe if you could briefly speak about like, you think you've talked about how your interest developed from the cardboard to the Technic sets to Mindstorms. Like, what was it? How did you find that job and get involved with it? Maybe the path has changed for anyone looking to get into that now. But what did you study? What was the it seems like, yeah, with this big job that kind of propulsed your robotics interest even further. But what was, in terms of looking to get a job as a toy maker, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like, it wasn't, it was something that it was a little hard to actually get into, because, like, you know, like, it was, you know, when you tell someone, like, you know, you want to design toys, they're like, all right, well, you know, and I looked at, like, a lot of different programs of, like, you know, specifically toys. You know, like, one of the best programs was, like, through the Fashion Institute of Technology. They had, like, a toy program, and that was, you know, and I was like, well, do I want to go and do that, or do I want to continue and do some kind of regular engineering? And so I kind of continued just kind of doing, like, regular engineering, and then it was kind of I was still kind of building things on my own, and then it was, like, through a classmate of mine who was doing a graduate program at Tufts, and he had, like, a professor who was looking for someone to help him design a project for you know, a program that he was doing for middle school students. And my friend knew that I would build all kinds of crazy stuff, and he was like, hey, do you want to help me make this thing? And so I was like, oh, okay, let me check it out. And so what he wanted to do is, he had, like, a little miniature wind tunnel, and he wanted to create, like, a small little plane that would sit in the wind tunnel, but it had, like, actual surfaces that could move, and kids could control the surfaces and have the plane react in the wind tunnel. And so I met with the professor, and so I got the gig. It was just like a contract gig for, like, 2 months to build this thing, and I started building it, and it turned out that it was really difficult to do, because one of the requirements was that he wanted it to be mostly made out of Lego, because he wanted the kids to be able to build the whole thing and go through it was a whole program. They would build it, and they would test it. And so I did several prototypes, and I finally told him, I was like, you know, I can't get this thing to actually behave right just using Lego. But I said, what I think I can do is I can make you a system where they can create their own wings out of styrofoam. And he was like, well, I don't really want to go away from Lego. And I was like, well, the system is, they will build 3 things. They'll build a little car that will actually, made out of Lego, that will actually cut the wings. And then they'll build a second little system that will then cut out the flaps. And then they take those components and they build the stand for the actual plane, and they'll take the wings and they'll put it on there. So basically what I created for him was a whole system of not just one thing, but actually 3 things that the students would build that would give them this final plane in the end. And at the end of it all, the thing that we built to get it to work, it was a little too big for his wind tunnel, but we were able to get it to work with just, like, a regular box fan. And that was a plus, because, like, we wanted this to be something that, like, a lot of middle schools could afford to do, and that the materials were easy to source and put together. So you would take this, you make this little plane. At the end of it all, we had a plane, and it was on a little counterbalance stand, and you had a joystick that was connected to a computer that was connected to the plane, and then you could pull back, and it would pull down the flaps, and so you had the fan going, and when you pulled the flaps down, it would lift up the plane. But the cool thing was, and this was where we would, like, always freak the kids out, we would, like, let the kids say, okay, now you can, like, level off, and they would level off the flaps, and the plane would sit there because the wings had the proper shape to actually give it lift, and it was counterbalanced, so it didn't need a lot. We would always trip the kids out, where we would then turn the fan off, and the plane would drop. And then when they saw that, like, what was holding it up was actually the fan, like, they really freaked out. And it was like one of those moments where the light bulb really went off for them. And it was really, really fascinating. So anyway, that was a long way of saying. So I did that project. That project was partially funded by the educational division of Lego. So the fellow who was the Lego rep saw that plane and was like, who made this? And then I got introduced to them, and that's basically how I get it. So it was I kind of fell into it, but it was, like, part of this drive that I had, where I had been trying to figure out, how can I pursue this, and how can I do this in the way that I want to, You know, because there are a lot of opportunities to make toys, but it's like the types of toys that I wanted to make. And so, yeah, it was just a very fortunate situation, but it was kind of born out of my desire to create something very special for those kids. Like I didn't want to just resort to, because we had talked about, well, maybe we just motorize the plane and have it all be faked. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So, yeah, and that's basically how it happened. I think, like, you know, for advice to other people who want to go into something like that, you know, part of it is I think, like, you know, just keep following that dream. You know, have a clear vision of what it is that you want to bring to that industry, and just keep doing it. Because I was building stuff on my own, like toy designs and things like that, before that, and so it's kind of, you know, you keep following that, and hopefully it'll come true.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like how you took this really systemic approach in terms of teaching people about, or teaching these kids about problem solving and having, like, really learning about the kind of natural and engineering focused phenomena that was really core to the model that you're building. So yeah, and showing that how kind of these unexpected small steps and anything that's kind of tangentially related build on that, and you never know how those connections kind of propagate from working on something. I know from everything you've said today so far, and especially in your role at the studio, you're constantly taking on work with new platforms and technologies. So how do you approach new tech that you haven't worked with before, or don't have personal experience with, but is still within the bounds of something you think you can take on as part of your role? Like, what approach do you bring to any sort of new technology?
Yeah. Like the first thing that I do is I try to learn as much as I can about the platform, particularly like what its limitations are. And so, you know, like if it's something like, you know, like when we were, you know, doing games for like Leapster, like we were really limited on like the computing power that we could put into it, again, because it is a toy, right? So toys generally, like the amount of technology you put into them is, you know, you try to keep it as cheap as possible because that's usually your biggest expense. And so it was, you know, getting the hardware, you know, making hardware that could actually run games, and we were actually building the games in Flash. And so we're using a light version of Flash and trying to get that to run on the board, but then also keeping in mind like what the constraints of that system was, so that we would build games that actually could run fluidly on that system. So that's usually the first thing I do, is like try to look at like what are the constraints that we're dealing with this platform. And then once I know kind of what the guide rails are, then I try to find out what the sweet spot is, and then it's like, okay, this is our play space controlled, like confined by these guide rails. And then within that, like, what can we do? What kind of experience can we create? And so like if it's something like VR or something like that, like, yeah, like understanding like, you know, what are the kind of the constraints of that space and what feels right in that medium. And then once you kind of have a good sense of that, then like, you know, then you're kind of free to play around within those confines. That's generally how I like to do it when I'm doing with something new. Find out what I can't do, and find out, you know, within what I can do, what's the sweet spot.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely suited you well here and obviously across your career.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I've enjoyed listening to all the different things that you've done thus far, and I can probably like deduce the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. This question was submitted, but it was from myself, and I wanted to ask you, what are you deeply passionate about as a person? Not necessarily like a hobby or something like that, but more like, is it learning? Is it like curiosity, helping others understand things, and how you bring that every day, or how you bring that with you every day to try to give to the world?
Yeah. Like one of my favorite things to do is imagine things. I spend a lot of time daydreaming, probably more time than I should. And part of that, sometimes when I'm doing that, I'm not just like daydreaming, but I'm actually like mentally designing things. I've been told that I have that I can think in 3D. I don't really know what that means, but I do know that I do have a bit of a photographic memory, and so I think that's been a real blessing in a way that like it allows me to imagine things within my own head, and not only imagine them but also iterate on them. And I iterate on them like many times over, sometimes before I even put anything down on paper. Particularly like if I'm building something physical, or if I'm designing like something like a game, like I'll play through it in my head a lot before I even start to build it. And I think that like part of the drive for that is that I really love building things that other people can experience. It's a real joy when you make something and then you see other people play with it, and they're really having fun with it and they're enjoying it, and it's giving them some kind of pleasure. And that goes from like whether it's a game or it's a toy, or even some of the other kind of weird I guess you call them art pieces that I've built. Like some of the things I've made, some robots that serve cocktails. And it's always really fun because like, it's a lot of work to make them, but then like, you see people use them, and it's just really funny to like watch them enjoy something that you put a lot of work into. That's the thing that I enjoy the most, is that, getting that reward of like, you made something that made someone happy. It's pretty cool. And I think that, my approach to life, I guess my philosophical approach to life is like, I don't try to, as long as like, I feel like, as long as you're not causing harm to someone or causing, harm to yourself, like, then like that's kind of my rule. Like, don't try to, if you can bring goodness into the world, then you should do that. And try not to bring things in the world that might hurt people or hurt yourself, or, so that's kind of my driving philosophy, I guess.
Yeah.
All the joy and share it.
Yeah.
Anthony, you've clearly had such a storied career, and also have just had such wonderful insight into what play means to you, and also just how that ties into your overall philosophy in life and in design. And so I guess the last question that we have in the studio, I think you've actually already answered, but I'm going to ask again, is what's one piece of advice you'd give to an up-and-coming developer?
So maybe specific to games this time. This is Jason's question about passing along to upcoming producers in the games industry.
Like one thing is, I mean, there obviously there are a lot of things, a lot of lessons, but I think it ties into like, yes, what I was just kind of saying. I think, when I got my first iPad, it was like an iPad 2, and they had this feature where you could like engrave it with a saying or something, and I engraved it with a saying that was like it was like play every day. And I feel like, and so as far as like game development, I think that, kind of like what I was saying, like where I iterate in my head, like over and over, like when I'm thinking about that, it's like always be playing your game. Like even before it's built, like think through it in your head, play through it in your head, and try to put yourself in the shoes of the player. And imagine what it would be like to play through. And even when your game's built, do the same thing, like play through it as if you don't know nothing about the game. And I find that really, really helps. Like try to step out of your shoes and put yourself in the player's shoes, and always be playing it. And you'll see things, and you'll recognize things that could be improved or may not feel quite right. But yeah, I think that's the best thing. And then also it kind of there's that iteration that goes on as you play through. And that's really the best way that you learn how to make games. People say like your first game is never going to be your best one. And I believe that, like, you know, you don't believe that when you're a young developer. You're like, oh, this game's gonna be awesome, and, you know, but your first game is never that great. But just keep doing it. And when you have a new game, like keep playing it, play through it. Like, even if you have no one else to play with you, play it yourself, and then you know, and you'll get there.
Awesome.
I think that's great advice. Thank you, Anthony. And also, yeah, it's just always a pleasure learning from you too. That's from producer perspective. But also, just to kind of start wrapping things up, is there anything else that you'd like to share that maybe we haven't touched on, or?
No, this has been great. Like, I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of little things that, you know, like I said, like some of the questions, like I have tons of answers of things. But yeah, I think, like, you know, like I think if my career has been an example, I think sometimes things don't go in straight lines. And I think the most important thing is that as long as you have a clear vision of where you're going, then it's okay. You know, just keep going, and you'll get there.
That's really valuable advice.
It's great. So much wisdom. And now, after all this time talking and gaining that wisdom and sharing it, your cooldown has recharged. Anthony Fudd, what is your ultimate move? What's your fire it off?
Yeah, my ultimate move would be like a time spell, right? Where I can freeze time. And the reason why is because, like, I always feel like I have a lot of ideas in my head, and I always feel like, oh man, I'm never gonna, like, you know, bring all these to life. And sometimes I have an idea and I'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I'll kind of like, I'll work on it for a little bit and I'll put it to the side. And then, like, maybe like 3 months down the line, something will happen where it's like, oh, if I had that thing, it would be so great right now. So I think, like, you know, having like some kind of time spell where I could freeze time, either to allow me to catch up or allow me to, like, get ahead, would be great. So that would be my magic spell.
Good choice. From it. Well, yeah, thank you for cooling down with us, Anthony. Thanks for sharing all of this story journey with us. And thank you to everyone out there listening along to our first interview. If you'd like to get to know more about Funomena, our developers, and the ways that they make their games, check out our Twitter and keep an eye out for our next session.
Yay!
So thanks again, Anthony. Thanks everyone from the Marcom team. Great interview.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yes, Anthony, thanks.